Everything you've been taught about ancient Africa is a lie. While Hollywood had you believing Wakanda was pure fantasy, the truth is that multiple African kingdoms achieved technological marvels that would make vibranium look ordinary. Real civilizations thrived for over 2,000 years, building pyramids that outnumbered Egypt's, creating bronze art so sophisticated that modern museums still can't explain the techniques, and developing iron technology while Europe was stuck banging rocks together. But here's what they don't want you to know. European colonizers didn't just steal Africa's resources. They stole its history. They systematically erased these achievements from every textbook, every museum, every narrative they could control. Why? Because acknowledging African brilliance would shatter their entire story about who needed to be civilized. Today, we're exposing the real Wakandas that Hollywood borrowed from and the centuries-long cover-up that followed. Our story begins not in the kingdoms you might expect, but deep in the Nigerian plateau over 3,500 years ago. While most of the ancient world was still struggling with copper tools, the Nok people were doing something revolutionary. They skipped an entire technological age. Between 1500 BCE and 300 CE, Nok communities achieved what archaeologists call the greatest metallurgical leap in human history. They went straight from stone to iron, completely bypassing bronze. At sites like Taruga, 13 iron smelting furnaces dating to 280 BCE reveal furnace designs that can reach 1200 degrees Celsius. That's hot enough to melt copper twice over. The Nok mastered both metalworking and artistic expression. Their terracotta sculptures span 78,000 square kilometers, an area larger than most U.S. states. Each sculpture required precise kiln temperatures of 800 to 900 degrees Celsius and clay that chemical analysis proves came from a single source. This means centralized production, trade networks, and quality control across vast distances. The figures themselves tell stories of a complex society. Elaborate hairstyles indicating social rank, jewelry showing wealth distribution, and tools revealing their revolutionary iron technology. Some hold slingshots and bows for hunting. Others display the agricultural implements that would transform Africa forever. This iron revolution spread across West Africa through Nok trade networks, laying the technological foundation for every great kingdom that would follow. Fast forward several centuries, and that Nok innovation has traveled north to create something unprecedented, an African kingdom that would conquer the land of the pharaohs themselves. In 1070 BCE, as Egypt's new kingdom crumbled, the kingdom of Kush seized its moment from the capital at Napata. The Kushites had been watching their northern neighbors, learning and building their own power. What they created would dwarf their rivals in ways that still shock archaeologists today. Sudan contains 255 pyramids compared to Egypt's 118. The tourist destination everyone thinks of as the land of pyramids was actually outdone by its African neighbor to the south. The secret to Kush's power lay in their mastery of iron technology inherited from cultures like the Nok. While their enemies still wielded bronze weapons, Kushite armies carried iron spears and swords forged in furnaces that could reach temperatures no Bronze Age civilization could match. Recent excavations at Meroe reveal massive iron smelting complexes that turned the royal city into an ancient industrial center. Between 712 and 664 BCE, Kushite pharaohs like Pia and Taharko conquered Egypt and ruled as the 25th dynasty. Black African kings wore the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, restoring temples that Egyptian rulers had neglected and expanding trade networks from the Mediterranean to the Red Sea. Kush's power extended far beyond military conquest. Their trade networks stretched across 3 continents, connecting the African interior to Mediterranean markets and Indian Ocean commerce. Ivory, gold, ebony, and iron weapons flowed north, while Mediterranean goods, Indian textiles, and Chinese ceramics reached deep into Africa. Kushite merchants carried African innovations in metallurgy, medicine, and mathematics across the ancient world. The kingdom's mathematical sophistication shows in their pyramid construction, which required precise astronomical calculations and complex geometric understanding. Their water management systems included reservoirs, channels, and drainage networks that supported over 25,000 people in a desert environment, engineering that European cities wouldn't achieve for another millennium. Just like the Kushite built an empire that controlled trade across 3 continents, we're building a movement to reclaim our stolen history. If you want to help restore the truth about African kingdoms that rivaled any ancient civilization, subscribe to Black Stories Untold and join the resistance against historical erasure. Now, back to the video. Yet even as Kush dominated the Nile Valley, another African power was rising in the east, ready to control the seas themselves. Hidden deep in the Ethiopian islands, the kingdom of Aksum was building something that would make Rome take notice. From the 1st to 8th centuries CE, Aksum earned recognition as a major ancient superpower, standing alongside Rome, Persia, and China in terms of influence and reach. Building on the trade foundations that Kush had established, Aksum expanded African influence across the Red Sea and into the Indian Ocean. Mountain fortresses provided visibility for miles while remaining close enough to the coast to control the sea routes that connected 3 continents. Roman coins bearing the inscription King of Kings acknowledge Aksum's ruler, the African Christian emperor who controlled trade routes Rome desperately needed. Aksumite merchant fleets carried African iron technology, mathematical knowledge, and agricultural innovations to Arabia, India, and beyond. Their coins, bearing inscriptions in Greek, Ge'ez, and South Arabian, have been found as far as India and Sri Lanka, proof of commercial reach that rivaled any empire in history. But it's their engineering that truly demonstrates African genius. The 1,700-year-old obelisk of Aksum stands 24 meters tall and weighs 160 tons, a single piece of granite that required mathematical precision and engineering knowledge to quarry, transport, and erect. Recent ground-penetrating radar reveals these monuments are just the visible tips of vast underground complexes, royal tombs, ceremonial chambers, and water systems that supported over 20,000 people in a highland environment. These water systems showcase African innovation at its finest. Underground cisterns carved from solid rock, stone-lined channels that captured highland rainfall, and terraced irrigation that distributed water throughout the city. European visitors wouldn't see such sophisticated urban water management for centuries. In 320 CE, King Asana's conversion to Christianity made Aksum the first sub-Saharan African state to adopt the religion. Rather than cultural surrender, this represented strategic brilliance. Christian Aksum became Rome's key ally in a region dominated by rival Persian and Arabian powers. The rock-hewn churches of Lalibela, carved from solid volcanic rock in the 12th century, proved that Aksumite engineering traditions survived long after the kingdom's political decline. These churches required architects to think in 3 dimensions, carving interconnected chambers while maintaining structural integrity. Mathematical and engineering knowledge passed down through generations of African craftsmen. As Aksum's naval power dominated the eastern seas, the forests of West Africa were witnessing their own technological revolution, one that would produce art so sophisticated it would break European minds centuries later. The knowledge that had flowed from the Nok Plateau and the ironworking traditions that had built Kushite power were evolving into the Kingdom of Benin, where African metallurgy would reach its absolute peak. From the 13th to 19th centuries, Benin City housed over 100,000 inhabitants within earthwork walls that stretched 16,000 kilometers in total, creating one of the most extensive defensive networks in human history. These fortifications served as mathematical marvels that enclosed 500 interconnected settlements across 6,500 square kilometers using fractal geometry, patterns repeated at different scales throughout the city's design. Portuguese explorer Lourenço Pinto, arriving in 1691, could barely comprehend what he was seeing. Great Benin, where the king resides, is larger than Lisbon. All the streets run straight and as far as the eye can see. Deliberate urban planning created this marvel that European cities wouldn't achieve for centuries. The political system governing this vast territory demonstrates African innovations in statecraft that would influence democratic thinking worldwide. The Oba ruled through 3 distinct councils: the Uzama, hereditary chiefs; the Eghafbo Inore, palace chiefs; and the Eghafbo Inogbe, town chiefs. This system of checks and balances prevented absolute monarchy while maintaining efficient administration, a political innovation that predated European constitutional governments by centuries. But it was in bronze casting that Benin achieved true immortality. Using brass imported through Portuguese trade, Edo artisans created over 3,000 bronze plaques that served as historical records, cast in metal. Each plaque required furnace temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius and precise alloy compositions that modern metallurgists recognize as technically optimal. The lost wax casting process demanded mathematical precision, artistic vision, and metallurgical knowledge that represented the pinnacle of human achievement. The bronze plaques functioned as libraries in metal, documenting royal history, religious ceremonies, and daily life with details so intricate that each hair on a person's head was individually rendered. The artistic techniques perfected in Benin influenced bronze working traditions across West Africa, connecting to kingdoms from Ife to the Akan territories of Ghana. The technological sophistication extended beyond art. Archaeological evidence shows Benin's ironworkers produced steel using locally sourced ore and developed agricultural tools that supported intensive farming in forest environments. Their metallurgical knowledge built directly on techniques pioneered by the Nok, demonstrating technological continuity across more than 2 millennia. Yet, this achievement would become the target of the greatest cultural crime in human history. In 1897, British forces conquered Benin and systematically destroyed a civilization. They burned the royal archives, erasing centuries of written history. They stole over 3,000 bronze artworks and auctioned them in London, using the proceeds to fund further colonial expeditions. Major General Harry Rawson, who led the expedition, wrote that the artifacts were spoils of war that would help civilize Africa by showing Europeans what Africans were capable of under proper guidance. The object theft extended to narrative destruction. When British forces first saw the Benin bronzes, they couldn't process that Africans had created art superior to anything in European museums. They began a century-long campaign to rewrite history itself. European archaeologists consistently attributed every African achievement to external influences. When Bernard Fagg discovered those revolutionary Knox sculptures in 1943, academic papers immediately suggested Arab or Mediterranean origins, despite radiocarbon dating proven indigenous development. When German archaeologist Leo Frobenius found Ife bronze heads in 1910, he claimed they resembled classical European art and must represent a lost colony of Atlantis. Anything except African genius. This pattern became academic policy. UNESCO's initial assessments of African archaeological sites emphasize foreign influences over indigenous innovation. The Smithsonian labeled African collections as primitive art, influenced by more advanced civilizations. Academic journals published theories suggesting Phoenician colonies, ancient astronaut interventions, anything that avoided acknowledging African technological mastery. The British Museum currently houses over 900 Benin bronzes, generating millions in annual revenue, while Nigeria's repatriation requests remain unfulfilled. Museum director Neil McGregor stated in 2009 that the bronzes were safer in London than Nigeria, the same colonial justification used for the original theft. Similar stolen collections fill the Louvre, Metropolitan Museum, and German institutions, all profiting from African genius while denying African achievement. Educational systems completed the erasure. British colonial education policies, implemented across Africa from 1900 to 1960, taught that Africa had no history worth studying. American textbooks continued this through the 1980s, presenting Africa as the dark continent without civilizations or achievements, despite housing stolen evidence of African brilliance in their own museums. The conspiracy was complete. Steal the evidence, deny the achievement, profit from the theft. Archaeological evidence buried in African soil, oral histories preserved by African scholars, and modern technology continue revealing the truth. Archaeological techniques now prove what African communities always knew. Radiocarbon dating confirms that Kushite ironworking predated European techniques by centuries. Chemical analysis of Benin bronzes reveals unique alloy compositions, indicating indigenous metallurgical knowledge. Satellite imagery continues, revealing previously unknown urban sites across sub-Saharan Africa, each discovery making the cover-up more obvious. African scholars are reclaiming their narrative, using modern technology to reveal the full scope of ancestral accomplishments. DNA analysis shows indigenous development without external influence. Architectural studies prove African innovations in urban planning, hydraulic engineering, and construction techniques. Metallurgical research demonstrates that African ironworking, bronze casting, and steel production achieve levels of sophistication that European craftsmen wouldn't match for centuries. Today's African achievements build directly on these ancient foundations. Rwanda's drone delivery networks echo Oxumite trade innovations. Nigeria's fintech revolution continues Benin's commercial sophistication. South Africa's mining technologies advance Kushite metallurgical knowledge. African brilliance flows unbroken from ancient kingdoms to modern innovations. Wakanda existed in the highlands of Aksum, the forests of Benin, the deserts of Kush, and the plateaus of Nat, hidden in plain sight, protected by geography and African ingenuity. We cannot forget, and we will not let them erase us. These stories belong to us, and we're taking them back. They try to convince the world that Africa had no history, no achievements, no civilizations worth remembering. The evidence speaks louder than their lies. Africa stands as the foundation of human civilization. If you believe these stories need to be told, subscribe to Black Stories Untold and help us spread the truth they don't want you to know. Share this video, research your own heritage, and never let anyone tell you that Africa has no history, because we are the history they tried to erase. And if you want to understand how the same forces that erased these kingdoms tried to erase the humanity of our people, watch our video, 20 Terrifying Facts About Slavery. They didn't just steal our history, they tried to steal our souls.